My dear friends, greetings. They meet at night in mysterious places. Their hooded followers, barely lit by torches, let out a cloud of demonic laughter as they decide the fate of the world. These are the secret societies. And I seriously hope that you don't believe in all this folklore, because today we're not going to get into conspiracy. That's not the house style. We're instead going to do history, because if there are no strings to pull, nor a gigantic world conspiracy, the secret societies, on the other hand, have a historical reality, and they may have had their importance. Come on, let's lift the lid on the discreet Freemasons, the mysterious Illuminati, the crazy Ku Klux Klan, the obscure Skull and Bones, the esoteric Rosicrucians, and those who have come to light a little more thanks to video games, the Assassin Sect. A nice program with no secrets. And we start with the heavy secret society question, since the Freemasons have been attributed a major role in historical turning points. Representing a secret political power, they would be responsible for all the evils of the earth. Historically, first of all, Freemasonry as we know it today is rather recent, since it only appeared at the beginning of the 18th century in England. Its roots are older, however, as the English version of the word Freemason is attested since the 14th century. At that time, the word referred to a highly skilled mason who freely went from job site to job site. Yeah, thank you, Captain Obvious. The craftsmen of the time, organized in guilds, could not move as they wanted. Near the building sites, the Freemasons usually set up a home called a lodge and met there to discuss, exchange techniques, and learn all the useful skills of their trade. Over time, these lodges would have progressively welcomed other people not working in the building trade and would have become places of more or less philosophical debate. These groups, based on solidarity and mutual aid, accept more and more people, but you have to be chosen by one of the members to enter. In 1717, 4 lodges decide to merge into one big lodge in London. This is the birth of modern Freemasonry. Afterwards, lodges were created in all other cities of England, France, Europe, and even America. Thanks to their power of attraction and a fashion effect, they bring together the cultivated elites of the Enlightenment. To name but a few, Voltaire, Casanova, the Marquis de Lafayette, Benjamin Franklin, Mozart, and George Washington were all Freemasons. Many French revolutionaries were also Freemasons, and conspiracy theories have claimed since 1797 that the French Revolution was their initiative, forgetting in the process that it had decapitated the organization, both figuratively and literally, because many brothers were from the nobility. In the 19th century, Freemasonry continued to grow on all continents, but was divided into many branches called obediences. It provides laboratories of ideas where, thanks to the secrecy of discussions, bold themes can be freely considered. The role of the organization is thus often evoked in the establishment of secularism in France. We are far from the religious thing then, but still, the ceremonies seem quite mysterious for those who are not initiated in Freemasonry, because the symbols are absolutely everywhere. I myself had the chance in my former life to film a great Masonic lodge for a report, and I must admit, it's a bit mystical. There are symbols related to architecture, of course, like the square, the compass, the plumb line, or even God called the great architect of the universe. But in the Masonic temples, the rituals borrow from everywhere: the Bible, alchemy, Egyptian antiquity, and even the Templars. The members, called brothers, use secret signs to recognize each other. Freemasonry is in fact an initiatory society in which one climbs different ranks as one's moral elevation and Masonic experience progress. First apprentice, then journeyman, and finally master. Freemasons love role-playing. Besides, this document, which dates from 1876, is nothing less than a certificate of Master Mason. For a so-called secret society, that's already a lot of information that I can give you on it, right? We can ask ourselves a question: is everything known about Freemasonry? Well, not totally. 2 secrets must always be kept. What was said at the meetings, first of all. The Mason must not repeat anything in order to allow complete freedom of speech and opinion during the discussions. Secondly, he must absolutely keep the secret of his membership in the order. Everyone can declare that he belongs to Freemasonry, and this is quite common. But nobody is allowed to reveal the name of a brother or sister. And yes, because there are also female lodges. And this is something that has evolved over time, because in the past you didn't even have to admit to your family, to your relatives, and to your spouse that you were in Freemasonry. I'm not saying anything, but it's still weird to say, I'm going to get the bread, to come back 4 hours later and trying to pass it off with a little, no, but there was a line, huh? Faced with this discretion, Freemasonry is accused of everything and its opposite, of being anti-Catholic or anti-Protestant, favorable to the devil or too submissive to God, communist or capitalist, Jew-friendly or anti-Semitic, etc. The truth is that there are as many branches in Freemasonry as there are in conventional society. On the political spectrum, there are left-wing lodges and right-wing lodges, for example. In any case, from the very beginning of the Freemasonry movement, it is rather badly perceived by the Church. They even went so far as to be excommunicated. The first condemnation by the Pope falls in 1738 and is only suppressed in 1983. The Freemasons are also persecuted by totalitarian regimes. In the USSR, the organization is considered to be of bourgeois origin. The Nazis banned it in 1935, while Franco in Spain went so far as to judge Freemasons who had long since died. Today, there are fewer and fewer Freemasons. In the 1970s, there were about 7 million, while today there are only between 2 and 3 million worldwide, 2/3 of them in the United States. And keep in mind that all this is just an estimate, because to give an exact number is quite complicated between all the obediences, which do not communicate all their numbers. In France, there are 22, so it's not bad. If we had to summarize in a few words what Freemasonry has become, we could summarize it like this. It's somewhere between a philosophical club, an initiatory order, a supportive and fraternal community, a political lobby, or a network of influential people. In reality, it is a bit of all of these at the same time, and above all, it is a society that is more discreet than secret in the end. On the other hand, the Freemasons have been a great inspiration for the next secret society we're going to talk about, the Illuminati. And for the time being, we will develop a little bit less the other secret societies because they are often organized on the same pattern. The Illuminati take their name from Latin and refer to the enlightened, not in the sense of slightly crazy guys, but rather those who know. Like the Freemasons, from which they draw much inspiration, it is a freethinkers group created in 1776 in Bavaria by a former Jesuit. These intellectuals, among whom the philosopher Goethe, want to change things by spreading the ideas of the Enlightenment, and in particular by bringing more equality. At its peak, the Illuminati order may have had as many as 1,500 identified members, divided into 13 ranks. Yes, they also like role-playing games. You should see if there aren't Illuminati Freemason guilds in World of Warcraft, because to get together, I think it should be a little bit more discreet than 50 guys with a torch in a Parisian basement. In short, 1,500 members is a great success for a secret society whose success is starting to worry the Bavarian authorities, and later the other German states. The Freemasons also looked at them with disdain, especially since the Illuminati were not the last to infiltrate existing Masonic lodges. In Bavaria, the Elector of Bavaria is suspicious of them. He considers them to be plotters and potential revolutionaries. So he decides to ban them, brutally. On March 2, 1785, all the Illuminati are prosecuted, even persecuted. The surprise is total. Almost all of them stopped their activities, and some of them even publicly denounced the former organization. In 1786, the year after the ban, Goethe declares, "May all secret associations be eradicated, whatever the result." Some Illuminati write to Benjamin Franklin, who was a Freemason, as we said, to ask him if they can take refuge in the United States. We don't know what his answer was, but it is enough for some conspiracy theorists to imagine that the group would have settled there, influencing the construction of the country, which is still today the American policy. Without sinking into these delusions, it is undeniable historically that German elites could be seduced by these ambitious projects of social reforms carried out by the Illuminati. And quite probably, one finds former members in the patriotic clubs that were created in Central Europe to support the French Revolution. And this is certainly the only historical influence that this ephemeral secret society was able to wield. I'll remind you that it only lasted 9 years, but it could have given good ideas to good novelists like Dan Brown, if you consider that the Da Vinci Code is good. But well, it's not really my place to judge that. The Ku Klux Klan was born from a defeat, that of the southern states of the United States during the Civil War. On December 24, 1865, 6 veterans of the Confederate Army, which is bored stiff, decides to set up an association to refuse equality with former black slaves. The name is deliberately mysterious. Ku Klux would come from the Greek kuklos, indicating a circle, and clan refers to the clan of Scotland, the founders being of Scottish origin. To maintain the mystery, they hide themselves with sheets that they also use to cover their horses and sow fear in the black populations they cross. But the idea takes hold in the southern countryside, and in 1867, the founders think it's time to structure the organization. In Nashville, Tennessee, they establish principles and an organizational chart with fancy titles, largely inspired by the myth of King Arthur. The leader of the order, the Grand Wizard, is General Nathan Bedford Forrest, who served in the Confederate Army and had become rich through the sale of slaves. By the way, there's a little reference to Forrest in the movie Forrest Gump, where his mom named him Forrest after that nice guy Nathan Bedford Forrest. Well, his mom also tells him that the Forrest part of his personality is to remind him that sometimes we all do things that don't make sense. Phew, yeah. Well, at the same time, I'm not going to call my kid Adolf to give him a moral lesson, but everyone does as they please. The members of the Klan are convinced that they are part of the Invisible Empire, whose mission is to maintain the supremacy of the white race in the southern United States. To do this, they hunt down blacks, but also their accomplices, the supporters of equality, such as the civil servants of the North. And it's the whole range of violence that goes on: insults, threats, intimidation, harassment, humiliation, arson, and of course, murder. Worried about this violence, the political powers put pressure on the organization, pushing General Forrest to dissolve it in 1869. In any case, in the southern states, political, economic, and media power in the 1870s was in the hands of whites. With the segregation laws passed from this period on, the victorious Klan on ideas becomes useless. So it disappears for the first time. In 1906, a book by Thomas Dixon is published, The Klan Man, which is adapted into a film in 1915 under the title Birth of a Nation. The film was a great success and received a lot of support, including that of the American president at the time, Woodrow Wilson. I remember when I was a kid, I wanted to be a paleontologist for almost 10 years after seeing Jurassic Park. Now we see that a movie has managed to revive a movement like the Ku Klux Klan. In this way, one should not underestimate the power of a media like the cinema. The Klan is reborn in this dynamic and widens its fights, always against blacks, but also against immigration, Catholics, communists, Jews, and while we're at it, homosexuals. In 1922, the new imperial wizard, a Texas dentist named Evans, turns the Klan into a business. You have to pay your dues, buy your KKK insurance, and even buy your official costume, including a hood, from the organization. From then on, the Klan became a real public success, especially in small towns and rural America. From 10,000 members in 1920, the Ku Klux Klan reaches 5 million in 1925. This is absolutely huge, and I myself, before I worked on this episode, had no idea that there were so many members of the Ku Klux Klan at one time. The Ku Klux Klan actions liven up the weekend evenings a bit, with cross-burning, parades, masks, initiations, and even barbecues between members. It's a sort of racist brotherhood where one recognizes oneself between members of the Klan by signs and codes. In a bar in the south of the United States, to find a friend who is a member of the Klan, you just have to ask, "Do you know a Mr. Ayak here?" Ayak means, "Are you a Klansman?" That is to say, "Are you a Klan man?" You have to imagine that in the 1920s, in some villages, almost the entire white population belonged to the Klan or was sympathetic to it. Imagine the horror for black populations that reside there. If there is violence or murder on one of them, there is rarely an investigation because the local police officer is himself a member of the Klan. These millions of members are also very influential, especially in the South, where the Klan has reportedly elected several governors and senators. But if the power of this secret society seems limitless, this is not entirely true, since several American states hostile to the Ku Klux Klan finally passed laws prohibiting the wearing of masks outside of holidays such as Mardi Gras and obliged the Klan to publish the list of its members. And being an anonymous racist, that's pretty good. But claiming to be a racist in the eyes of everyone, that's a little less acceptable. It is therefore the inexorable decline of the organization. After 1945, the Ku Klux Klan is only a shadow of its former self. And this despite the fact that it is again violent in the 60s and 70s with burning of churches, houses, and even murders. It keeps on dividing, creating so many small structures, more and more local and especially more and more insignificant. Today, it is estimated that there are barely 10,000 adherents who gather around white supremacist groupings. That's still way too many, but it's still a lot less than 5 million. We stay in the United States with the next secret society, Skull and Bones. This is probably the most secret of all these organizations. Its members are totally forbidden to talk about it. Let me stop you right there. It has nothing to do with Fight Club or pirates, but rather with a student fraternity at Yale University, to be precise, one of the most prestigious in the United States. This group was founded by a certain William Huntington Russell in December 1832. It was modeled after a German secret society, the country being at that time quite specialized in the genre, and Russell having studied there for a year. It is called Skull and Bones, also known as Chapter 322, or the Brotherhood of Death, which promises a nice atmosphere, far from the beer pong and wet underpants contests we see in American fraternities in movies. Each year, 15 graduating seniors are approached by club members. Obviously, the most promising students are chosen, the most powerful and the most brilliant academically and athletically. For a long time, it was a men's club, but since 1991, it has accepted women in small increments. One of the reasons was to avoid lawsuits that would put the organization in too much of a spotlight. For the initiation, we find the usual decorum. The future members, called knights, have to follow all sorts of initiation rites, one of which consists in telling all their sexual experiences, and others in kissing a skull and worshiping the number 322. The secret society is particularly rich. The Russell Trust Association, which is its business name, has an estimated fortune of several $1 million, including a private island on the Canadian border. Many legends circulate about Skull and Bones. It is said that 6 bonesmen, including George W. Bush's grandfather, stole the bones of Indian Chief Geronimo in 1917 and stored them in the clubhouse. It is quite debated among historians, but when in doubt, the great-grandson of the Apache chief sued the university in 2009. Unsuccessfully, as the case was dropped in 2010. As in all student brotherhoods, Skull and Bones exists for one purpose only: to place its members in important positions so that they will then give way to each other. And it works pretty well, since there are quite a few famous bonesmen. Among them, the 2 presidents Bush, George Sr. and George W. Bush, Henry Luce, the founder of Time magazine, the former Democratic presidential candidate John Kerry, and more widely, senators, judges, bankers, sportsmen, artists, and CIA officials. Impressive, but also quite commonplace, since the same type of fraternity can be found in other prestigious universities, such as the Fly Club at Harvard, for example. In any case, there are quite a few investigations on Skull and Bones, and reliable information is rather rare. So now you know about as much as we can know about it. Just as mysterious, the secret society of the Rosicrucians appeared in the open with the publication in 1614 to 1615 of 2 anonymous manifestos in Germany. The first, entitled Fama Fraternitatis, is very ambitious. It is called Universal and General Reformation of the Whole World, and is addressed to political and religious leaders. It wants to change the world in a utopian way, and includes in the work another text in the form of an initiatory novel, the Rosicrucian Movement. It is said to have been founded by a knight in the 14th century named Christian Rosenkreuz, hence the name Rosicrucian. This knight is said to have lived 106 years after traveling to the East, where he is said to have met sages and founded a new spirituality. His tomb was rediscovered in 1604, in which a small golden book containing his teachings was found. In 1615, a second text, then a third one the following year complete the Rosicrucian Bible. As you can hear, I use the conditional tense a lot when I present these stories, because for historians, all these texts are largely legendary. Christian Rosenkreuz did not exist, and the movement would have actually started from young Lutherans in the early 17th century, who would have wanted an even more radical Reformation than the Protestant Reformation. It was a utopia aimed at creating a universal religion reconciling man, science, and nature. With a healthy dose of alchemy, esotericism, and Renaissance principles. This type of utopia was not isolated, and there were others in Europe at the time. The mysterious and prophetic dimensions of these texts would interest many scholars of the time, leading to numerous polemics, first in the Germanic world, then throughout Europe. Some see it as a revelation, others as pure witchcraft. Rosicrucian orders are created from the 17th century onwards and give themselves distant origins, going back to Greek philosophers and even to ancient Egypt. Links are naturally made with Freemasonry, which considers the Rosicrucians as one of their inspiration. Currently, many esoteric movements and associations claim to be part of this tradition. The philosophical, intellectual, and spiritual background of Rosicrucianism is in the public domain. In fact, it's become a bit of free software for the esoteric society. For the last part of this program, I propose to come back together on a secret/sect society that you surely know from afar thanks to the Assassin's Creed saga, the Assassins. To understand it a little better, we need to go back to the conflict between the two main branches of Islam, the Sunnis and the Shiites. During the wars that opposed them from the end of the 7th century, and still now, by the way, the Shiites are defeated. However, they hold on in some areas and develop their own culture and clergy. But the arrival of the Seljuk Turks from the 1050s changes the situation. It is the Sunnis who intend to make all the Muslims of the Near East return to Sunnism. In Iran, a Shiite resistance center develops from the 1090s onwards. At its head, Hassan Sabah. He converted to Ismailism, a branch of Shiism, and took control of a fortress in Persia called Alamut, which means the Eagle's Nest, located about 100 kilometers northwest of Tehran, in the Al-Borz Massif. Nicknamed the Old Man of the Mountains, Hassan Sabah founded his sect there and trained fighters to fight first against the Sunni Abbasids, then against the Seljuk Turks. The movement, which is called the Nizarites, is very structured, efficient, and its members observe a total discipline and obedience. It has been compared in its organization to the Knights Templar, who also unleash passions around a whole bunch of legendary stories. I suggest that you watch my episode on Arville, the oldest Templar commandery in France, and the one about the Templar trial, to know a little more about this little digression. Let's go back to the Assassins. A branch of the movement established itself in Syria in the 12th century. Though he has good fighters, Hassan Sabah is aware, however, of the inequality of forces. Far from being crazy, rather than banking on pitched battles, he prefers to develop targeted assassinations of Sunni leaders. These elite soldiers are fedayin, who sacrifice themselves, a rather revolutionary way of action for the time. The method is always the same. The fighter sneaks up on his target, then stabs him in public in broad daylight, preferably in front of a mosque and at prayer time, so that there will be a maximum of witnesses. And all this before being killed himself in the process. Yes, well, it doesn't end up exactly like the video game, unless you're bad. Among the most famous murders, there is the Sultan and the Vizier of Baghdad, which leads to a war of succession in the empire. We can also mention the governor of Mosul, the emir of Aleppo, and his son. Some Crusader Christians too, like Conrad of Montferrat, king of Jerusalem, or Raymond II of Tripoli, but most of the dead are Sunni. So compared to the game, we are far from the Templar hecatomb that we're doing. Sometimes the assassins are easy to blame, and out of paranoia or political interest, we attribute to them murders that have nothing to do with them. And at the same time, there are many legends about the Order of Assassins. These kinds of stories are often passed off as just another legitimate thesis. It is even said that some, acting for the French king Philippe Auguste, would have considered executing Richard the Lionheart in Chinon in 1195. All the victims were political figures, never civilians. The Nizarites impressed each time by their fanaticism and their devotion to their leader. However, they failed on some targets, such as Saladin, who avoided their dagger. Quiet in their mountain fortress, the assassins resist all attacks against them, sometimes by diplomatic actions, using the divisions of the Muslims to their advantage, but also by accepting when necessary to pay tribute to the hospitable Crusaders. Their end came in the 13th century with new conquerors, the Mongols, led by Genghis Khan. In 1256, these besieged the fortress of Maimondiz, forcing the master of the order to submit and abandon most of his fortress, Alamut, to them. Its walls are raised and its library, one of the richest in the East and containing the archives of the sect, goes up in smoke. Most of the assassins are executed, and their last stronghold falls in 1270. A few survivors went into exile in Afghanistan, Pakistan, or India, but one last thing remains to be explained. Where'd the name assassin come from? It is said that to motivate themselves in battle, they would be drugged with hashish, hence their name assassin, from hashishin, intoxicated with hashish. The Old Man of the Mountain would have created an artificial paradise in his citadel with a fake garden and a harem of slaves to motivate his troops and show them what was offered to them after their sacrifice and death. The visit was done in the smoke of hashish. And let's not lie, hashish is not the drug I would have chosen to incite to violence. A bit of Bob Marley or Doc Gynéco on top of that, it's okay. Maybe you wouldn't become so famous. In any case, this origin of the name derived from hashish would probably come from an etymological error. Oriental sources do not mention it at all. On the other hand, Marco Polo, who passed through the region 15 years after the disappearance of the assassins, reported this legend. But he didn't know the sect and is content to peddle legends about it. He largely contributes to feeding the myth taken up in the 19th century by an Austrian Orientalist, Josef von Hammerpurgstall, then in the 20th century by a Slovenian author, Vladimir Bartol, in his 1938 novel Alamut, and finally in the 2000s by the Assassin's Creed video game series. In this last case, the secret society was a little less secret, but it stayed in the theme, according to me, because of the legends that surround the assassins and all the secrets told about them. Thank you all for watching this episode where we debunked a few preconceived ideas, and thank you to Stéphane Genêt for preparing the show. Thank you all for watching this episode. See you soon for a new adventure. Bye.